Welcome to Tales to be Told in the Dark. If I remember rightly, this is episode 25. Anyway, regardless of the number, although just popped into my head, 2 and 5 makes 7. It's a divine number. Maybe quite appropriate for this video topic, and that is the subject of eugenics. I'm sure most of you have come across or familiar with the story associated with eugenics. So I'm not going to go over that. What I will say is I am not against eugenics one bit. Now that might be a bit of a shock horror. I've deliberately said that because it's a little prime example of don't react. Just wait and respond. Okay, I was being a little bit unfair, or was I? Because this realm, this reality, is always half-truths. So I have given you a half-truth. When I say I am not against eugenics, I am not talking about what most people would understand it to be. I'm talking about what it is based upon. To me, it is very clear, and I hope through my explanations that if you haven't already seen this for yourselves, that this reality, the materialist, or shall we say the perspective, or what's the word I'm looking for here? The perception of these controllers of this reality. It's quite clear that what you're actually getting is the same things being played out over and over again, but just slightly updated with a different stage set, a different time, a different era, different costumes, slightly different characters, but still the same archetype characters playing the roles, as it were, with humanity caught in the crossfire of it all. So when you see something, I've said this before on video, look in the mirror. If you can't see something from one side, then look at it from the opposite side. And then hopefully you can see the twist that has been put in it. As I've suggested before, what is being presented to you throughout your daily life is a reflection, although it would appear to be negative. If you can take the twist out of it, it reveals a far more positive thing upon which that negative is based. So let's give you an example here. Let's look at evolution. That's probably the most relevant one at this moment, and it's something that is being implemented, or has been implemented, since shall we say, the third month of 2020. There was a prelude to it in the October of 2019, I seem to remember. And then this speculation of what if there's this particular thing that is going to affect all of humanity. Well, it certainly didn't it? I mean, most of humanity just rolled over like an obedient dog. It was quite an eye-opener, shall we say, to the speed and how everything had been taken down to a level a new level, no longer a level like a terrorist that's maybe lurking around the next corner or up on the roof, out to get you, as it were. Now it's gone to this invisible enemy that you can't even see, and yet many governments seem to know exactly when to implement a shutting down, shall we say, and specific to the day of the following week, which is quite amazing. But not knowing what it is, but knowing exactly what day to implement these particular rules and things. But if you are at a certain point on your spiritual path prior to that event, and I include myself in this, that basically I wanted the world to shut the F up. It was just getting too noisy and, well, be careful what you wish for. We certainly saw that rolled out, and it was beautifully quiet. And I still travelled about freely, with no trouble whatsoever, despite all these stories about those army roadblocks here, there and everywhere, and never saw any evidence of that. What I did see was some lovely clear roads, and didn't have to go particularly fast, so I was saving fuel and not getting any hold-ups and delays. It was almost to the point where you could nearly guarantee that you could get to any junction and just keep going without even looking, as it were, because very few people were about. That was really amazing to witness all of that. So let's look at eugenics and what it really means in its esoteric rather than its exoteric materialist play out. But if we take this negative polarity story, what have you got? You've got the perception is a group of people who've elected themselves as above everybody else. It's funny, with that word eugenics, you could almost put a particular letter, say a letter J in front of it, and that would give you an awfully big clue. Because this follows the reflection and the bounce back of being a perpetrator but playing the part of the victim. A certain select group who ostensibly would appear to be a religion, an illegal state, and a distinct race of people all in one. But I feel that's a mask level to the whole thing anyway. There's like a human shield, like a shell around something within that. I mean, after all, it is all go within, and there's a big clue in that. Looking at these so-called controllers, it's going within a layer, like it's often described as like layers of an onion, but with each layer coming off, it's getting closer and closer. But when you reflect that internally, it's the know thyself. Bear in mind the term that I've alluded to with saying put a letter J in front of it is a misappropriated term. I again refer you to the channel Culain Ruled by Venus, and it's the book Irish Wisdom in the Bible and Pyramids by Conor MacDari, written in 1923, which we need to be clear what we're actually talking about here. Certainly the UK and the United States, within the government, within the financial thing, they have a thing called a treasury. But if you break that word down, you'll see it is tree usury. It's life force, your tree. And the usury is the ones that are this intermediary that have put themselves between you and your higher self, and even it's the same with religions. They've put in this great dummy in the sky, and this intermediary that you're supposed to go to. If it's the Catholic religion, you're supposed to go to a confessional and talk to a priest who you refer to as Father, and yet in the Bible it says there is only one Father. The contradictions are incredible. So, as I've said before, the way my perception of this reality is that if you look up at the sky, that's the inside of a firmament, and it's basically a mirror. So all these little lights and things, the sun, the moon, are just bounce backs from something that's beamed up from, maybe, so for argument's sake, we'll say where the North Pole is, the Mount Meru. It's almost alluded to with those searchlights on, I think, was it? It's one of the big film networks. They'd always have this fanfare intro and these sort of searchlights, and I feel that is pretty much showing you what this sun and moon and all the stars are just. You're just looking at a reflection. I mean, it's been commented about there's an artificial sun. Well, if this whole reality is a simulation, well, of course it's an artificial sun because everything else is artificial. And I really do feel that, to use a Neville Goddard terminology, this is God or the Creator at the limit of opacity in individual expressions as each and every one of us. This is the rock bottom. I mean, this is why you've got this solid material realm and it's full of rocks. Well, this is the rock bottom. It can't get any more dense than this, and it would seem that humanity can't get any more dense than it is at its present moment. I must take a little side note tangent here. I'd refer you to, or I feel it would benefit a lot of you to familiarise yourself with the lectures of Rudolf Steiner. There is very much an assumption that humanity has been the same all the way along. But if you look at history, you'll see when we get to you come out the Dark Ages, as it's called, you've got characters like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo, and this sudden spike that mirrors this spike in population around about 1900, a sort of fairly static graph, and then suddenly it shoots up, and we've gone from 1 billion people in the world to between 7 and 8 billion, and that's the same graph, the same pattern, with the majority are down on that lower level, and then there's this spike with these very few that have 99% of the wealth in this world. So I would familiarise yourself with what Rudolf Steiner talks about, that the humanity has gone through an evolution in the last, say, 500-600 years. The frontal cortex is a very recent development. This whole thing about evolution taking thousands or millions and millions of years is totally untrue. Now, where is the proof of this? Well, you've got Mother Shipton's caves in Yorkshire, where this mineralised water will petrify and turn to stone anything that's this flowing water with these minerals drips upon. But there's something even more apparent than that, and it is right in front of you. Very closely in front of you. Think about when you go to sleep at night. Your eyes will excrete a liquid. By the morning, it has gone crusty. Now consider how quick petrification can really take place. So likewise, evolution. is no different. Rudolf Steiner talks in terms of it would be a very strange concept to a human of, say, 600-700 years or even further back to think in terms of I sing as opposed to we are singing. Hopefully that makes sense. The sort of the thinking and the consciousness was such that it was more of a dreamlike state, and there wasn't this individualized ego in the same way there is today. Likewise, look at land masses and things. You'll see that coastlines are continuously changing through erosion or other areas there are being deposited, and that can happen over quite a short period of time, far shorter than the implications given by science on such things. So getting back now to the topic of eugenics, the reason I've gone about this in this way is talking about reflections, is because let's look at the word eugenics backwards. So you've got SCI. Well, that's implying science. Now the middle syllable, gen. Now the other way around, it's negative. It's a negative polarity. So it's a negative science. And that leaves EU, interestingly European Union, but it's also energetic you, or your energy. That is what, it's a scientific, something negatively scientific implemented upon your energy. I feel that was, the point was made, shall we say, from early 2020 onwards. I can't really say any more than that, but I'm pretty sure anybody that listens to this channel can work out exactly what I'm talking about. But remember, this whole thing is an amazing maze. So to get round censorship, you just have to be creative and use your imagination and say things in a more unique or individual way of saying things that circumnavigates around what would be perceived to be an obstacle. A bit like that line between the yin and the yang. It's an S. It's a reverse curve as well. It's a maneuver. Another way I could give you this in a daily term would be to talk about again, this is a personal experience. Being given that information that you have chronic fatigue syndrome and there is no cure for it. Well, my way of dealing with that at the time, believing what I was being told, being offered a script, and I took it, so I started playing the role. And of course, the thinking has an effect on the physical body that then will manifest those symptoms. So no wonder I was feeling tired. I was doing it to myself. But through that, what a valuable lesson, because it's okay. I've got past the anger stage and the frustration with self of not being able to do certain things like I could before. But now we're adopt a more positive approach to it rather than seeing everything in a negative way, and it's a real problem. It's like, okay, we've set ourselves a list of 10 things to do. If I get 4 of them done, that's a win. Okay, there's 6 left over, but it's better to do 4 than none at all, or fail on the first one. But it's like, well, okay, I might not be able to do it today, but tomorrow might be different. I might feel like I've got more energy. Notice the word feel there. That's your true sight. That's the thing to listen to. Your gut feeling, the place of the sun, but check in with the heart and make sure it is coming from the heart, not coming from the ego mind. because your thinking can bring about feeling. And if you're in a negative thinking, it's probably going to give you a negative feeling. And then your reactions will be probably on that same polarity. So always check in with the heart first with everything. Get to the heart of the matter, in the material realm especially. So we've gone a little bit off topic again, but we're dealing with all aspects of what is basically a tree of life, a tree of a story, our story, which is his story when it's the ego mind. But it is our story. It is my story, which is a mystery. So this tree has its main branch, its main trunk, but it also has some fairly strong branches that come off of that main trunk. So this is why the stories unfold organically as well, and this is why we can go off on tangents, but then we bring ourselves back to the trunk again. I'm finding the more so as and when I go off on a tangent, and it's like, just breathe, bring yourself back to the topic of eugenics. Here we are again. So what is it really about then? Because that's clearly the external play out in this reality is based on something else. The negative or control system, which may be part of this computer game, cannot create. It can only copy, mimic, and replicate and keep repeating and just adding new twists to it, as it were. So let's look at eugenics. It's something that sets itself up as a high and sees itself as a higher authority, and it is determining what's going to live and what's not going to live. So what about when we turn this round into the esoteric, the inward journey, when you take responsibility for yourself and your own actions, which will determine what happens. So, for example, if you were presented a media story with the added spice of fear, are you going to believe it? Are you just going to take that script without even questioning it? We are going through a spiritual evolution. Now, I've heard this said on videos of several years ago about this control system work on the basis of they just will trick and coerce and tell you like half-truths. But they absolve themselves because they're not actually forcing you to do anything. They're enticing you and tricking you into doing something which you do if you give away your power. So what is the real eugenics about? It is the spiritual evolution of not just humanity, it's the spiritual evolution of all life. You could say that this is this game, this reality. Think of it in terms of a game. You're going from PlayStation 1 to PlayStation 2. You've got new graphics, which is a new sense of awareness, a new way of being more heart-centered, being more whole. This is what to me is what this is all about. I refer to this as carrying on the great work. And what do I mean by that? I mean the great work as envisaged by the composer Richard Wagner. And don't start all the shock, horror, he was a Nazi and all this nonsense. That's another misappropriation, because he was shining a light and exposing the mechanism and how it operates in this world. And it gets agitated and doesn't like being brought into the light, so it will use all its influence. But I've described Wagner as being like the second coming that everybody missed, and I feel I stand by that. What he reveals in the ring cycle is the same message that's basically in the Bible. It's finding oneself. It is really just one character expressed as various personified archetypes, exactly the same as the Bible. It's the same story of love triumphs over everything. I've got to bring myself back again. So the great work is we will make man whole again through art. I said, I think was it the last video or the one before? I said there's an art in everything, even lying. I mean, if you think about it, the film and the book that the film is based on, the Dickens story Oliver Twist, where you have this character called Fagin. Need I say more? Who's a handler of these children, and then you have a character in that who's like streetwise called the Artful Dodger. See, there's an art in everything. Art can be good or bad, and we perceive art from our own perspective of whether we judge a painting to be good or bad, or whatever it happens to be, a piece of music. So it will appeal to some, not to another. For example, go to a concert. The person that's standing next to you has had the same experience, but that music hasn't struck a chord. It hasn't. They're not attuned to that type of music, or particularly with music, you can have an attachment to a memory of an event. It can be good, or it can be a happy one or a sad one, and music will readily bring that back. It's the tones within the music. Interestingly, with Wagner, there is a thing called the Tristan chord. It's a diminished seventh. As I've expressed on the Vabart Productions channel, the 7 keys A to G corresponds to the 7 energy chakra system of the human body. So a diminished seventh, you imagine that, that's like a fall from the A, the crown, right down to the root, but it also can go the other way, of course. It is resolved. This is a term, particularly in classical music, about resolution. You have your first subject, your second subject, you have the resolution, you have the recapitulation, you have the coda. No coincidences with these terms and things. So have I answered what eugenics is about? You tell me. I'm giving you a perspective. I've not done any research. The only thing I did listen to, and thank you, Lana, for sending me, it was a discussion about the eugenics, who's behind it, and you'll find it's the same hidden hand, it's the same authors, and misappropriated terms and things, and the classic sort of narcissistic perpetrator-victim switch. That's part of one of these blueprints and templates to this reality, with the nature of this thing, this control system, the way it operates, this parasitic usurer thing. Usurer is another word. You can put that same letter in front of it, and that'll give you that same clue again. All roads lead to, well, Jason on Archaics calls them the tiny hats. I think that's a very good terminology, because there's another group that wears these tiny hats. I refer, of course, to the Vatican, which is part and parcel of the same thing. That is the usurping religion. And again, look at that, listen to that Conor MacDari reading on Culain, ruled by Venus. I feel it's very good to get a grasp of exactly what we're talking about here, and because the labels are always misappropriated, which neatly brings me on to say that the next episode we're going to look at Germany. And what is revealed in the history of Germany, which is so relevant to the his story of humanity. Hopefully that has given you plenty to sort of weigh up inside yourself. Let me know in the comments whether you agree or disagree, or have you got your own thoughts on these things? Do we have common ground on what's being talked about here? Do you agree with it when you see it from the spiritual perspective, and how this thing is implemented by tricks and coercion, basically? On a side note here, don't be fooled that citric acid is anything to do with citrus fruit. Citric, C-I trick, I-C trick. Watch for these little codes like electric, all act trick, elect. All these words, they have double meanings. It's worth paying attention, listen to them, say them over and play with the words, say them over fast and slow in your mind, see what you can come out, split the syllables in different places, like together, to get her, as Yolanda has mentioned in a recent video, I think it's the girl on the plane, and something the vet mentioned 2 years ago when she was on YouTube before, that theme of to get her, we're in this together. It's just plays on words on this world stage. And all donations are very much appreciated. As much as anything else, it costs €13 to keep a connection with the Wi-Fi. I'm in a position where I ain't turning back on connecting with the system. I've got to carry on this path, because it's a little bit of hardship, but people will put up a lot more hardship, like in, I don't know whether it's true or not, say the Second World War, the rationing, and if people will make do and put up because allegedly you're at war with another country, well, who's paying and who's going without is what I would ask, and for what outcome? Having a bit of discomfort and going without, it can be a challenge, but why? I ain't going to capitulate on this. The outcome of this is far greater than any fictitious war. The outcome of this, like I said, you've got to be all in. No good going into this half-hearted. You've got to be wholehearted to become holy and make man whole again. And I mean men and women, male or female. It's a generic term. Of course, the language is all done in a certain way by design. And again, something that's been hijacked and misappropriated, no doubt, like everything else. But hopefully that has answered the question, and until the next episode, love to you all.